Hello and welcome to this session in which we will discuss testing around the computer. Before we start, we would like to review real quick the relationship between general and application controls. General controls are evaluated before application controls. This is the same concept as in traditional controls. In traditional controls, first we look at the tone at the top. If the tone at the top is not good, we don't bother and rely on the internal control, because if the tone on the top, the people at the top, senior management, board of directors, shareholders are not ethical, well, we cannot rely on the internal control. Same concept applies when it comes to general controls and application controls. If general controls are no good, then we don't test application controls, because general controls would create misstatements across all applications. Therefore, it's useless to rely or test the applications themselves. For example, if we don't have segregation of duties, which is a general control, let's assume a programmer can also be a user. Then the programmer can do whatever they want to, because they can use the system and program it to make it do stuff to override controls. Or if there's no safeguard of assets, they don't have monitoring system, they don't have security cameras, they don't have fences, they don't have locks, they don't have passwords. Well, how good are the application controls at that point? So if general controls are effective, then we rely more on application controls. So in this session, we need to learn about internal controls when it comes to IT. How do we test internal controls? Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, FarhatLectures.com. Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses, broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today. When it comes to IT internal controls, we have to do the same thing that we did for the traditional internal control, which is what? Which is understanding internal control as well as assessing internal controls. The same concept as the traditional internal control. Matter of fact, it's more important because most controls are automated. Therefore, we have to test them and make sure they are working properly. Then what we have to do is to learn. We have to do inquiries. We talk to IT personnel and key users. We may interview the CIO and system analyst to gain information about software development and hardware changes. This is how we learn about the system. This is how we understand the internal control, the information technology internal controls. We also examine the system documents. Here we might need a specialist. Sometimes we may not understand as auditors certain technical terms or technical knowledge. We might have an expert, an IT specialist with us on the team. We also review program changes request and system test result. We will take a look at this, review it, make sure it's working properly. Also, we have to perform reperformance. Now, in reperformance, basically here we're going into the testing. We also have to test the controls. Now, when it comes to testing, there are two types of testing we can do. We might have a less IT complex environment. We perform a certain test for that, and we might have a more complex IT environment. For that, we will perform different type of test. In this session, I will focus on less complex IT environment, and this is where auditing around the computer takes place. So let's go ahead and discuss what is less complex IT environment and what is auditing around the computer. Less complex IT environment means we have no IT personnel or department. We don't have a dedicated individual or individuals or departments. So what happens is this. Most likely we give IT tasks to accounting department, or each unit handle its own IT needs. We have, on this environment, we have limited reliance on automated control, no test of application program. We don't test application program because we're not relying on automated control, on IT control. In this environment, what we do is we perform manual audit procedures, because the assumptions here is accounting system retain much of the traditional source document, customer purchase order, shipping and receiving, sales invoices, vendor invoices. What we do here is we audit around the computer. The system will produce enough trail to audit around the computer. So the focus in this environment is on input-output control, not processing control. Here, there's always a risk because we're looking at input-output control. They don't have a good system. There's a risk of someone accessing the master file, making changes, or risk of computer viruses in this environment because we don't have dedicated IT people. But how does it work? What is testing around the computer? Well, we have the computer, and it could be many computers or many servers, basically a place where we process transaction, input data, so on and so forth. So this is the processing step. And what we do is we feed this processing computer input, source document, and we generate outputs. Now we know what the output should be. Why? Because we already have the output. So what we do is we test the system. How do we test the system? We don't test the system. We don't know whether the processing is working properly. What we do, we say this: if we feed this information, we should get this result. Well, guess what? Let's feed the information to the processing system and see if we get the same results. If we get the same results, what is the assumption? The assumption is the computer is working properly. So what we did is we audited around the computer. We did not focus on looking at the system itself. We're not testing the processing aspect of it. We're testing to see if we get the results that we want to, giving the input of information that we are processing. If that's the case, great. This is testing around the computer. In what type of environment? Less complex environment. How about if we have more complex IT environment? If we have more complex IT environment, what we do is we audit through the computer. And auditing through the computer, we're going to have to conduct various steps such as test data approach, parallel simulation. Parallel simulation, it's also considered around the computer, but it's used also in more complex environment. Embedded audit approach and tagging transaction. We would look at the audit through the computer in the next session. What should you do now? Go to Farhat Lectures, look at additional MCQs, true false questions, additional resources. That's going to help you understand what is testing around the computer. Under what condition do we perform those tests? It's important to understand IT controls and how we test IT controls, whether the environment is a complex IT environment or more or less complex. Whether you are an accounting student, CPA candidate, good luck, study hard, and stay safe.